It was a real nightmare. A monster with flaming scarlet eyes rushed at a woman who stood up to protect a child who, overcome with fear, cowered in a dark alley. Even pitch darkness could not withstand the blinding golden bolt of lightning, which momentarily illuminated the silhouette of a ferocious four-legged monster. The people looked up in a mixture of awe and alarm as a blinding light flashed above them, filling their faces with a glow of wonder and concern. A gloved hand appeared in the frame, and underneath it appeared the caption, "In the novel, in this light." The young man stood with a confident smile against the backdrop of a bright glow, and behind him 2 people stood silently, as if embodying the phrase that they became heroes. With the power of the heroes, Korea began to fight the monsters, which was reported in the news, telling of the conquest and strengthening of dungeons in different regions. Gradually, people managed to establish control over the metro and towers. Cataclysms began to be used as a source of industrial development, and over time, humanity gradually emerged from its difficult situation. The narrative noted that Korea, along with the United States, had become one of the strongest countries, attracting famous heroes from all over the world. With the city skyline glowing in the sunset, the story was told of how Korea had founded the world's best hero training center, where they taught advanced magic and magical technology. This is how the Cubic Academy came into being. Cadets from all over the world trained here, and in the shadows stood 4 figures, surrounded by swirling, glowing energy. Above the emerald hills and sparkling forest, the sky was clear and crisp, creating a peaceful and picturesque landscape. Hajin released a powerful vortex energy attack, shrouded in blue and purple flames, in the middle of the forest area. He stood still as tongues of blue and violet fire swirled around him, filling the space with an intense, otherworldly glow. The figure of a man, surrounded by a dense ring of fiery energy, stood out against the background of the story of those who dared to oppose him. Thus ended the review of the world situation. The narrator revealed that this world was created not by God, but by the author himself. However, a problem soon arose, and the scene changed to a giant arena, surrounded by a cheering crowd and a colorful rain of confetti. During the initiation ceremony, the announcer announced the first place among the freshmen, while a young man stood on the stage with a concentrated expression on his face. Ses Kim Soo-ho was shown standing confidently in a spacious arena filled to capacity with spectators. He was thinking quietly, his face half hidden in shadow, and below him was a bright, sparkling sky with an inscription about the world he described in the book. His gaze was fixed on the image of a smiling young man projected onto the stadium's huge floating screen, as if he were right in front of him. Se Kim Soo-ho's profile appeared on the screen, and the narrator confidently confirmed that this was the very same world. Against a dark, abstract background, internal doubts about what had happened could be heard, and off-screen voices discussed Kim Soo-ho, calling him outstanding, lucky, and suggesting that everything could have ended much earlier. A young man with blue hair and bright blue eyes smiled softly, surrounded by an intricate, shining pattern. He kept a special secret in his soul, which he could not tell anyone. He thought about the future and who his opponent was. In front, a tense figure clenched his fist, and behind him, another calmly held a map in his hands as the name Shin Jong-hak appeared in the sky. A confident young man with white hair stood in the stadium with his hands in his pockets as the crowd greeted him with loud cheers. The white-haired man with golden eyes smiled with self-confidence, and the narrator mentioned that he was the grandson of an oligarch, the owner of a large corporation named Johnson. Their duel resembled a clash of light and darkness. One held a glowing blue weapon in his hands, and the other was surrounded by raging scarlet energy. The 2 main participants stood in front of the podium, and someone watched them from behind, realizing that they were undoubtedly inside the world of the book. Someone's hand gently touched his shoulder, and he thought that if this was a character from his own novel, then he should at least have a name. The young man asked if Chukun Dong had gone to bed late last night, while the others sat silently on the steps behind him. One of the characters nervously asked if the other had spoken to him, and he cheerfully confirmed that, yes, he had. He asked if there was another Kim Chung-dong among them, his voice sounding tense, and a sharp, echoing sound could be heard nearby. He covered his face with his hands, shuddered and thought, "My face," and then noticed a glowing sign and realized, "This is a question mark." Exclamations of surprise and the words, "What? What is this?" flashed across the sky, conveying amazement and confusion. And at that moment he realized that he had become a character not mentioned in the book. Two guys in sports uniforms were chatting animatedly in the stands, while nearby a girl was clapping her hands enthusiastically, surrounded by sparkling confetti. He covered his face with his hand, believing that without a face no one would pay attention to him, while the younger boy ran happily next to him. He reflected on the fact that he was simply called a cadet and had no friends, feeling completely disconnected from the main characters of the story. In his mind, he was just a filler character for the audience seats, while only his feet and shins were visible in the frame. He sat hunched over on a bench, his head propped up on his hand, above which hovered a glowing question mark, symbolizing his confusion or deep thought. Several students sat nearby. One was clutching his head in confusion, while the others looked relaxed or engrossed in conversation. One day he received a message. Late at night, he sat at the computer, thinking about the strange people who enter the academy, wanting to rewrite a novel that has gone out of print. He was silent, lost in thought, and a faint glow snatched part of his face from the darkness. A young man with disheveled dark hair stood in the semi-darkness of the room. A glowing notification appeared in front of him, on which he focused his gaze. At night, shimmering shards of light hovered above the dormitory building, foreshadowing an event that would become the starting point of subsequent events. He noted that he had been looking at this face for 2 weeks already, and had even managed to get used to it a little. Dark red aura enveloped the young man as he walked confidently among the shadows, and the narrative revealed his name to be Kim Jong-dong, one of the many minor characters in the story. He stood in the bathroom, thinking that, despite all his attempts over the past 2 weeks, he still couldn't understand who, how, and why brought him here. The man with white hair calmly watched the collapsing dark tower surrounded by purple energy, and the young man with blue hair smiled at the holographic screen, realizing that he might have to stay in this world for a long time. Someone's hand grabbed the edge of the underwater surface, and a voice reflected that there were about 10 years left until the moment when the publication of chapters would stop. He leaned against the sink, depressed and silent, and a dark aura thickened around him, conveying his inner confusion. His shocked gaze was accompanied by a glowing question mark, and he wondered aloud what it would be like to spend 10 years inside a book. His laptop, books, and pens floated in the digital space as he thought about his own life and his unwillingness to remain trapped in a book, trying only to survive. He leaned heavily on the surface, shocked and silent, and around him spread out a cosmic backdrop strewn with stars and planets. He leaned against the sink, thinking about how to find his way back, and all that occupied his thoughts was how to follow the main plotline. An inner voice told him that even if he reached the middle of the story, the chapters would still stop coming out. He leaned his palms against the surface, exhausted, and began to say, "And for this," while dark, blurry silhouettes slowly floated above him. Under a clear sky where seagulls soared, a bright cityscape spread out, and in my thoughts there was a reminder of the need to go to school and a mention of Q. The place was located on an artificial island in the East Sea, where about 5,000 cadets were trained at the academy, among whom were future heroes. The city was a center of advanced technology, magic, industry, and talented people from all over the world, making Korea one of the most influential powers. He recalled the city center, which was a key location for the events of his book. Against the backdrop of a clear blue sky, the modern building of the Cube Hero Training Center stood out, with people strolling around its spacious entrance. Among those who aspired to become heroes with unique abilities, only a small elite group was given the opportunity to study in Cuba, and 3 fighters were already preparing to fight the Dark Shadow. He remembered that the current owner of this body, Kim Jun-dong, was also listed as a cadet at the academy. He didn't know what kind of abilities this guy had, but he guessed that they must be significant for him to be here. He hoped that these skills would help him cope with any difficulties that lay ahead. In front of the massive, richly decorated doors, he thought about how he could survive in this cruel school. A student suddenly burst into the spacious, futuristic classroom, attracting the attention of his classmates working with holographic panels. The girl yawned tiredly, and the serious young man stood with his arms crossed. The caption indicated that this place united both positive and negative characters. They stood tense and collected, aware of their roles as allies or rivals at this crucial moment. Hajin looked straight ahead with a bright smile, surrounded by shimmering blue holograms, while someone's hand pointed at something out of frame. The formation of groups was about to begin, which would lead to a series of events, and yet he was standing among his focused classmates, stretching confidently. Sitting at the table with the glowing screen, he thought about how he would have to spend 10 years with them without ever knowing their faces. Taking a step forward, he silently noted that the days were flying by, and he hardly noticed their passage. He walked up the stairs, marveling at the thought that he could spend his days in high school, when he suddenly exclaimed, "What?" He wondered out loud what kind of package he had in his hands, noting that no one had warned him about the delivery, and began to open the box. Someone pulled out a narrow strip of paper from the container, wondering if these things belonged to Kim Chow Hung Dong personally. He shouted that it was his laptop, but at that very moment the device was roughly thrown or dropped. He stared at the laptop in shock, not understanding what was happening, until a glowing loading circle appeared on the screen. The display began the synchronization process with Kim Ha Jin, showing two shining silhouettes with the captions Kim Jun Dong and SP54. The system displayed variable characteristics on the screen: muscle strength, endurance, magical power, and fixed parameters: intelligence, patience, luck, and charm. He stared at the screen in shock, realizing that it was a build log he had created himself. He wondered internally who could have sent him this, looking down in alarm and feeling beads of sweat roll down his face. A glowing progress bar indicated that the digital synchronization was 99% complete. The screen suddenly burst into a bright blue light, filling the room with a glow as digital symbols began to float around. A message appeared announcing the receipt of the unique change settings. A figure with a shadowed face loomed behind the cracked glass, and cracks spread across the surface in sharp, glowing lines. Hajin found himself in a circle of bright blue energy and watched in surprise as the glow around him grew more intense. He froze as blue particles flashed above him, and then a notification popped up saying that all metrics were being reset for synchronization. Someone slammed a laptop shut, and a dry click echoed throughout the room. He stared at the screen with a shocked expression, wondering if the reflected face was really his. His gaze darted across the flickering blue screens, full of confusion and anxiety, as he pondered the origin of this phenomenon. The silhouette was surrounded by a glowing aura, and the narrator mentioned the phenomenon of awakening, known in this world as enlightenment. After this, access to their abilities, techniques, and skills opened up, allowing them to become much stronger and more effective than before. The text explained that a status window was now open in front of him, recording the completed synchronization, skill reset, and accumulated experience points for Kang Ha-jin. The display showed information about the observe and view functions. The first allowed you to track people within sight, and the second allowed you to check the laptop's settings at any time without additional tools. He stared in surprise at the screen, where his characteristics were assessed on different scales: muscle strength, endurance, intelligence, and luck. The first thing he noted was the need to check each indicator by interacting with the floating holographic panels. His attention was immediately drawn to the completion of the synchronization between Kim Chung-dong and Kim Ha-jin, as well as the reset of the player's skills and the conversion of 10 points. He silently thought, not understanding what caused the change in his face, noting that he had become weaker than Kim Cho-hung-dong, although his indicators had increased. The young man continued to silently ponder what the next problem was that lay ahead of him. The text revealed that the unique right to change settings allowed editing and creating data for inanimate objects, as well as distributing SP between experience points, skills, techniques, and physical parameters. At this point, someone asked, "What is this?" He wondered out loud, not remembering ever having such a skill, and read that SP was earned as his importance in the world grew. Questioning the wording, as Kim Ha-jin's importance grew, he suddenly realized that in order to survive, he would have to increase his role in this book, experiencing mixed feelings, from surprise to determination. He ran in a panic from a giant fire dragon and a stone golem, wondering if the laptop and new powers were just given to him to get him into the story's plot. He stood in front of the flickering holographic screens, confused and thinking to himself that this was all complete nonsense. One of the panels displayed a placeholder with a symbol and a note that the information would only be revealed after the main storyline had been completed. He realized that if he wanted to return to his world, he would have to intervene in the course of this story. Sitting heavily and drooping, he showed clear signs of fatigue and inner disappointment. At his laptop, he mused that if he just waited patiently, the book's plot might stop. But he doubted that he would ever be able to escape this world. He came to the conclusion that if the hidden information turned out to be useless, then clues could only be found in contact with the main characters. He thought about distributing points across stats, knowing that he needed to become stronger to pass the story's key challenges. The hand pointed to the glowing options of muscle power, health, and magic power. And the narration explained that the leveling system was unknown, and only valuable points could improve the parameters. And for their greatest effectiveness, it was necessary to choose the method of application with special care. He decided to invest in the characteristic luck, imagining himself among the symbols of gambling, dice, chips, and bright jackpot signs. The message, "You have applied luck," flashed on the screen, and a scene conjured up in my mind's eye of two men in suits shaking hands surrounded by lottery balls, tickets, and a frying pan of eggs, symbolizing money, bonus points, and personal connections. He noted that this skill can be useful even in everyday life. He thought that although unchangeable stats like luck couldn't be directly increased, they could be exchanged for SP points. My hand fell on the keyboard, and in my thoughts flashed, maybe I should try. While the system offered to exchange 10 points for 10,000 SP. The screen showed the result. 9,000 SP had been invested in luck, which raised the indicator from 6.330 out of 10 to 9.0 out of 10, leaving the other stats unchanged. A glowing purple frame appeared before his eyes, with the words, "Mysterious Luck Application," written on it, and a swirl of magical energies surrounding it. He sat at the table, looking at his laptop in surprise, and quietly said, "Oh?" There was a report of a mysterious luck being used that raised the score to 9.1, and he began to wonder if luck could influence even such small things. In his chair, he estimated that Kim Soo-ho's magical power was about 9.0, and came to the conclusion that he was, indeed, lucky. Someone was typing on the laptop, thinking about how to rationally spend the remaining SP, because training in Cuba was ahead. He used the massive luck bonus to increase his patience, raising it from 6.6 to 7.207, and confidently noted that fate was clearly in his favor. Suddenly, a warning about an error affecting the probability increase popped up, and he exclaimed in shock, "What?" The system has notified that SP can no longer be changed via immutable stats. He sat, looking at the screen in frustration, thinking, what a torture this is. And his appearance betrayed his fatigue and depression. In his chair, he admitted that there was a limit to trickery, but even the increase in luck and patience achieved could already be considered a significant success. Suddenly, he noticed a new detail and thought, by the way, looking at the data on story points and their exchange rate, he thought about how to spend them, imagining a tall building under a clear sky. As two men came out of the building, and one of them noted that they had done an excellent job of their morning training. He sat at the table, resting his cheek on his hand, and said that he would introduce himself now. The man introduced himself as Kim Soo-hyuk and stated that he would be their instructor for the entire year. The girl reported that her rating was 3,850, which corresponds to 9,737th place in the world, and he noted that for 2 million participants, this is very impressive, while recalling that he had already seen her before. He decided that there was enough information and suggested getting to the point. The pyramid glowed ominously, and a voice warned that the cube was not a place for entertainment. Failure to achieve high results threatened to cause a lag, since less than half of the cadets made it to graduation. She noted to herself that this is where heroes are raised, which means they will be judged by the strictest standards. The man in glasses ordered everyone in a firm tone to stand up and follow him. The first thing we decided to do was determine our primary weapon before moving on to the rest of the steps. Someone's hand touched the glowing screen of the tablet with force, instantly activating it with a bright light. Se Ha-jin and the others flinched at the unexpected sound, their faces tightening as their attention turned to the event unfolding before them. In the semi-darkness of a futuristic room with glowing blue panels and a large emblem on the wall behind the podium, stood a dark figure. Ses. On the dark surface, two shiny katanas rested nearby, shimmering in the bright light. A close-up of double-edged axes was shown displayed on a glowing panel, and someone quietly said, "Bay." The man in glasses insistently demanded that the others decide quickly, and two people reacted to this with noticeable surprise and tension. The voice warned that the chosen weapon could not be changed for 6 months, urging him to think carefully about his decision, while someone's hand tightly gripped the hilt of a sword. He confidently drew his sword from its sheath, standing in a room where trophies and combat equipment hung on the walls. The palm firmly held the arrow, already pulled onto the bowstring, preparing to shoot. She drew her bow with focused determination, aiming straight at her target. A girl with long blonde hair looked at the glowing blade in the dim light as the figure in the background moved away. She held the sword with a serious expression, and behind her stood a confident young man. Both were dressed in the same blue and white uniform. He mentally noted that all the key characters had made their choices without much hesitation. He stopped in front of the display case with weapons, mentally noting that now it was his turn to choose. He decided to himself that he needed to think this through carefully. He understood that with his current capabilities, he would not be able to compete with the weapons that the other cadets wielded. Even if he wanted to improve his performance, the effectiveness of targeted investments would only decrease over time. Therefore, he formulated several conditions for himself when choosing his main weapon. He decided that it had to be something he had already used in the real world, and that he could quickly get used to. This thought became the starting point for the solution. A young man with a short haircut looked confused, and next to him, a girl with two tails was carefully examining a sword in a room where there were rows of weapon stands. The same man in dark glasses looked puzzled at the data on his tablet, while someone off-camera wondered if he was serious. The man in orange glasses reacted with surprise, as evidenced by the pop-up sign. He asked if she was really going to choose this weapon. He held a glowing gun in his hands, looking away with a serious expression as blue flashes and digital particles flickered around him. He stood confidently in the center of the room, holding his weapon, while the others watched silently from the gloom. The man with glasses, looking through the tablet, remembered that Cadet Kim Ha-jin used to use a sword in the military academy. However, he made the decision to change weapons, holding a pistol in his hands in a futuristic room with rows of gun racks behind him. The man in glasses confirmed that joining the cube was his personal choice, emphasizing that the final word always remains with the cadets. The man in sunglasses firmly added that the correctness of the choice is not important, because all responsibility lies with him. He stood motionless in the futuristic room, looking straight ahead with a calm but focused expression on his face. This was especially important for an ordinary person who did not possess magic. The narration explained that the local environment mainly uses magic bullets, which are much more powerful and destructive than steel bullets, as they contain mana. Despite all this, pistols never gained widespread popularity among cadets. The instructor announced that Cadet Kim Ho-rak had passed the exam, and the red-haired man, thoughtfully taking a drag on his cigarette, reflected on the destructive power of a pistol, regardless of the strength of its owner. The narrative explained that the second reason for the neglect is the pistol's lack of deep and meaningful history, unlike weapons shrouded in myths and legends, represented in the images of ancient symbols and dragons. In the illustration, a mythical figure held a glowing orb above stormy waves, while below, a knight on horseback raised a shining sword, symbolizing legendary artifacts and the rise of weapons with a rich history. The story noted that the Cuban cadets often preferred weapons with a history, relying on personal strength and magic bullets that could surpass their capabilities. While someone noted that all this did not concern him personally, he looked slightly surprised and worried, a bead of sweat glistening on his face and a simple geometric background stretching behind him. He wandered alone down the hallway, thinking that he wasn't a manhwa hero, had never held a sword, and had nothing in common with the other cadets. He recognized the pistol as a worthy choice, was confident that he could handle it, and decided that it was also a good way to earn points. Once the weapon had been chosen, he now believed it was necessary to master the corresponding skill. The screen displayed an image of a glowing, ornate circle with the word ability written in the center, glowing golden and covered in intricate patterns. Say, glowing blue sword cut through a large rock, and the narration explained that such a skill could be attributed to supernatural abilities. In normal cases, each person was only given one ability, but there were exceptions, illustrated by a close-up of a sword in a sheath at someone's side. In the text, Kim Soo-ho was introduced as having a hidden skill and an obvious ability in swordsmanship. He would step forward with his sword sheathed and ask a question in surprise. She checked with Chae-yoon if she had also come to practice, holding a bow in her hands in the brightly lit room. The girl asked irritably why there was a gym at all, and asked if he went there, to which he awkwardly replied that there were usually fewer people there after classes. They were discussing the new archer in their class, mentioning someone named Ha-young, while standing to the side in the spacious room. She frowned sharply, and someone asked what was wrong with her expression. He stated emphatically that he did not recognize the man as the shooter, wondering how the owner of a pistol could have a shooting range of 1 kilometer. She replied that he had simply given up on the role of a hero and was probably planning to leave the academy early, without even waiting for the official expulsion. She looked in surprise at the dark figure approaching her, silhouetted against the brightly lit open space. He calmly noted that one should not throw around such words without due consideration. The girl with reddish hair looked confused and asked again, not understanding the hidden meaning of what was said. The young man with blue hair smiled warmly, surrounded by a soft glow strewn with stars, creating an atmosphere of calm and peace. She shouted angrily, clutching the bow tightly in her hands, and he nervously apologized, haltingly repeating his words of justification. The girl angrily said that if he was not going to train, then he had better leave. He quietly pressed his finger to his ear, listening intently to something invisible. He wondered internally if they were talking about him now, and at the same time ironically noted that such gossip should count towards his SP. He thought that the main character, Kim Soo-ho, would be able to become the greatest hero precisely because of his ability, and therefore, skills are crucial. Looking at the glowing screen of the laptop, the screen displayed information about a unique skill that could bring 10,000 SP, and he thought that it would be unforgivable to miss such an opportunity. He decided that he should first try out the sniper skill, described as a skill of mastery over a long-range weapon. Say notification appeared, indicating that 10,000 SP had been spent on creating the skill, and a close-up of a concentrated eye glowing blue heightened the effect of the moment. He wondered if he could handle it all on his own, as a detailed description of the sniper ability appeared on the screen, along with its characteristics and level of mastery. The character came to the conclusion that any ranged weapon would be useful, and realized that he could use not only a pistol, but also a bow. He thoughtfully assessed his growing skill, admitting that his current level is still low, but that it is the opportunity to develop it that will become an advantage in the future. With determination, he pointed to the option he had chosen, affirmatively stating his choice. He stretched as he sat at the table and noted to himself that he was now fully prepared for the tasks ahead. The lecturer at the podium spoke about the need to focus on examples of clearing towers and dungeons, and the students listened attentively, located in multi-tiered rows of a spacious, bright hall. He recalled how at first he thought it was just a set of illegible lines, but in the end he received a whole detailed textbook. The teacher talked about the rewards for fully completing the Holy Apostle Guild Tower, and the narrator noted that thanks to the observation and viewing skill, he can perceive information especially clearly. He pondered the literal meaning of these terms, realizing that he was able to monitor those within his field of vision, even watching their smartwatches. A glowing holographic screen with data and a rotating globe hovered above the laptop, and text explained the ability to open settings tables at any time without using tools. She suggested reviewing the material covered during the day, reminding her that an exam was approaching, and received a quiet agreement from the girl with a reluctant expression on her face. The same girl asked in irritation why they needed to study such nonsense, insisting that the abilities were enough to demonstrate in a real fight, while the man next to her maintained an indifferent look. The doors swung open and a voice shouted, "Truth!" and ordered the class to assemble in the square in 20 minutes. Na-yoon suddenly reacted with surprise and excitement, while Ha-jin, who was watching her from behind, looked bored. Two people were sitting at the table. The girl was looking thoughtfully to the side, and the guy was looking intently straight ahead. He exhaled tiredly, propping his face up with his hand, and a drop of sweat slowly rolled down his cheek. The bright sky above the stadium suddenly lit up, and a voice announced that the introduction would be skipped, and the team formation would begin immediately. The text explained that each team should consist of 4 members, 2 warriors, 1 archer, and 1 assistant. The fair-haired man added that the team's composition would remain unchanged until the midterms, and that both strong and weak cadets would be included in them to ensure balance. The man in glasses told everyone to get used to their partners to avoid confusion, and immediately suggested checking the distribution of teams. He looked shocked to learn that he had been placed on the second team and couldn't believe it. With some tension, he admitted that he would be in the same group with Yeon-ha. The text contained an ironic phrase, "It's always like this in books." The protagonist stood alone under the spotlight, surrounded by many dark silhouettes, while others watched silently next to him, hinting at the tight interweaving of stories. She stood with a calm and confident expression on her face, radiating a special aura that made her stand out from everyone else present. The text revealed that she was the successor to Korea's leading guild, Essence Strait, and the heir to a famous clan, Sace. At first, she was in conflict with Kim Soo-ho, but over time she came under his influence and became his reliable ally. He came to the conclusion that Yeon-ha was an extremely important character, and the more often she appeared in the story, the more points he could earn. During the training, he clenched his fist tightly, deciding that he had to find a way to get her attention. The girl with long, dark hair turned around in surprise when she heard the greeting, which was said with a joyful, "Hello!" Jin Ho-sung cheerfully reminded them that they were on the same team, and Hazuki listened to him with a bright, hopeful expression on her face. He considered the question of team membership, and, having decided that the answer was yes, came to the conclusion that it could not be ignored. The girl greeted Jin Ho-seong and Hazuki in a friendly manner, but one of them noted that it sounded too formal for people of the same age. She asked where the fourth member was, looking around with a serious expression on her face. Suho walked over with a focused look, and Hajin and Nayun watched him, feeling the tension growing. She looked at him carefully and began to speak, starting with one word, "You." He decided that he shouldn't show any doubts, knowing that Yayo Yunha despised those who lacked confidence. The tall guy excitedly asked the dark-haired guy if he had chosen the gun, while the green-haired girl silently watched the conversation. He sarcastically noted how quickly he had become famous among the freshmen, and then abruptly asked if they had time for idle chatter, causing shock among his interlocutors. The tall man with sunglasses remained silent as the green-haired girl quietly said, "Oops," and the two boys reacted nervously, one of them clutching his chest in surprise. The voice reported that the coordinates of the monsters had been sent to the smartwatch to organize the battle, then ordered to continue, having received an affirmative answer. The device on the wrist projected a glowing holographic map into the air with a marked point of interest. She looked at the map and said that they were almost there, and asked everyone to be ready. He added that they would be able to check the information about the monsters upon arrival, and at that moment she turned around in surprise at the approach of someone from behind. He lowered his head in despair, mentally admitting that he might die. Shock washed over him, and sweat broke out on his skin as he realized that despite his performance exceeding human norms, he was still far inferior to everyone else. The boy with an axe on his back rushed forward, and the green-haired girl with a sword on her side wondered if they were mid-level Cuba cadets. She suddenly noticed something, and announced that they had arrived, while the others stood warily nearby under the clear sky. The training area at beach number 8 opened up before them. A boat rocked on the calm water, and a girl with long, dark hair stood on the shore and peered into the distance under a bright blue sky. A huge purple octopus tentacle powerfully cut through the water, and the words, "Black Humpback Octopus," appeared above the stage, accompanying the dynamic underwater sequence. They watched as the massive purple sea monster thrashed violently through the water, causing splashes and waves to form between them. On the beach, one of the participants suggested that they begin discussing the plan, while the others listened intently at the very edge of the water. A hologram of a low-ranking monster called the Black Humpback Octopus appeared in the air, accompanied by a note stating that its attack power was weak. The story specified that the main danger was hidden in the hump, from which, when threatened, cubs emerged and immediately attacked enemies. Several dozen blood-sucking octopuses burst out of the hump, each of which could dry out an ordinary person to the state of a mummy in a second. The girl explained that at the beginning of the battle, it was necessary to destroy the younglings, and if there were several dozen of them, Hajin, the shooter, would have to take command. She firmly stated that she takes responsibility for the octopus's offspring. She ordered to retreat and conserve magical power, emphasizing that the black octopus quickly recovers, and its hump must be destroyed with one precise blow. He asked in surprise if they were trying to exclude him from the training mission in this way. He asked if everyone was ready, and she, standing under the clear sky, calmly exhaled. She said the plan would remain the same, and he silently thought to himself that she really was annoying him. The powerful impact destroyed a large stone structure, scattering debris into the air. A giant octopus smashed through a massive underwater structure, causing a splash and massive destruction. The huge object crashed to the ground, shaking it, and on the cliff by the shore stood a figure, triumphantly raising a weapon in the middle of the explosion. The powerful blow shattered the large purple mechanical object into pieces, and a determined young man in a blue hoodie stood with a shovel, surrounded by shining energy. The figure on the shore watched the large sea creature thrashing about in the water, and thought that it needed to be lured onto dry land first. A bright, blinding light flashed, accompanied by a sharp sound, indicating a sudden, powerful attack. There was a loud splash, and hundreds of drops of water flew into the air. The young man shouted furiously, rushing forward with a glowing weapon, while a determined girl in a scarlet scarf rushed along the edge of the ocean, holding the sword tightly in her hand. He held the gun with all his might, feeling beads of sweat running down his face, his focus completely on the target. The purple, ugly creature shook violently, making sharp, piercing sounds against a dark, ominous background. He quickly dodged the monster's powerful blow, barely avoiding the crushing attack, holding the weapon with a determined expression on his face. In his tension and excitement, he wondered in his mind whether the moment had already come when the enemy would fall. The figure raised a massive axe towards the bright sky and then brought it down with force, sending several small purple creatures flying in all directions. She charged forward, swinging her polearm, her dynamic lines of movement and sharp sounds emphasizing the speed and fury of her attack. He gritted his teeth, then launched a swift blow with the glowing weapon, putting all his strength into it. A powerful, flaming red explosion crashed down onto the ground, and the two fighters jumped back, barely avoiding the impact. An ominous figure loomed on the horizon, and glowing pink fragments slowly fell into the air, filling the scene with an unsettling mystery. Powerful energy swirled around the determined woman, and her hands tightly clutched the weapon, ready for the decisive clash. He admired her strength while kneeling, and the narration revealed that the person in front of him was ranker Yo Yun-ha, who had placed 7th in the cube entrance exam. He rushed away from the monster, shouting his gratitude, and the girl remained standing, ready to meet the monster face to face. The huge creature lay on the ground, and 3 fighters stood nearby, after which one of them swung the glowing weapon with force, focusing his gaze on the target. The sudden blow caused a shock, and the glowing eye opened wide in surprise. Sei's fierce battle ensued, with the long-haired warrior attacking the monster, sending powerful shockwaves across the ground. She deftly dodged the huge purple spikes that pierced the ground and watched as the small purple creature was sent flying away in a bright explosion. The monster with sharp teeth rushed forward furiously, and the girl with green hair froze in frightened shock. Nayun quickly warned Yohaka of the danger, and he turned around just in time to see the enemy rapidly approaching. He dodged a glowing purple attack aimed at his head at the last moment, demonstrating exceptional focus and agility. The spent cartridge flew into the air, accompanied by a sharp, metallic ringing sound. He was kneeling, pointing the gun forward, while around him, in the bright light, flying fragments flew. Without rising from his knees, he aimed and fired with utmost concentration, surrounded by glowing blue symbols that increased the power of the shot. She insistently called out Kim Ha-jin's name, and he remained determined, although there was a slight tension on his face. Each increase in Kim Ha-jin's importance in this world brought an increase in SP that could be exchanged for points, but he was initially outside the main storyline. In chibi style, characters were shown with arrows pointing at them, while the narration explained how difficult it is to expect high value, and that the only way is through personal intervention in the events of the main characters. He aimed his pistol at the 2 opponents ahead. One figure stood confidently, holding a whip in his hands, and the other was preparing to lunge. She suddenly opened her eyes and opened her mouth, expressing genuine shock and disbelief. Someone urgently called out to Ha-jin, but Nayun warned him not to interfere, after which the giant purple creature was hit with a powerful blow, causing everyone to be surprised. The dark, sinister flower burst open with force, scattering petals and debris in a bright, explosive display. She clutched her staff, not hiding her shock and confusion, while the boy calmly watched from afar. He noticed dozens of monsters around him, and realized that their low intelligence made their trajectory of movement easily predictable. He quietly admitted that there would be no second chance, but the next moment his eyes lit up with determination. The glowing green creature fell with explosive force, surrounded by rapid lines of movement and flashes of energy. The skill he created, Bullet Time, allowed him to slow down the flow of time for 3 seconds when activated. Sei figure stood in front of the viewer with his back turned, while shurikens wrapped in swirling blue energy spun in the air, and a massive blurry shadow loomed in the distance. He aimed with concentration, realizing that everything now depended on technology, and fired rapidly at the approaching targets. The timer rapidly counted down the seconds as the 2 glowing beings clashed violently, illuminating the battlefield with powerful bursts of energy. The weapon fired rapidly, ejecting cartridges, and the digital countdown started at 52 seconds. He abruptly put on the virtual reality headset, focusing his intense gaze on the beginning of the digital countdown. Nayun unleashed a powerful blast of energy just as the timer reached 0. Filling the entire space with flashes of light and a flurry of movement. Blue energy bolts pierced the spinning golden rings, causing bright explosions as they flew at high speed. She suddenly noticed something, her eyes widening in surprise and concentration. The monstrous creature howled in agony as a glowing purple ball, entwined with intense red and purple lines of energy, erupted from its head. A powerful pink blast hit the creature, causing it to react with a mixture of shock and confusion. With a battle cry, she ordered the attack and swung the glowing weapon with furious determination. Two figures soared towards the glowing orb hovering in the sky, waving their weapons as the massive creature watched from below. One swung his shining axe with force, while the other readied his sword, and both released magical power in the tense moment of battle. A powerful beam of energy struck the monster with sharp teeth and tentacles, causing a blinding explosion of light and water spray. A giant purple tentacle shot up into the bright blue sky, sparkling in the sunlight. A huge, dark purple sea monster crashed onto the shore, and nearby stood three figures, one of which was holding a rope, watching the chaotic scene. Breathing heavily and covered in bruises, he asked incredulously if they had managed to destroy the enemies. The girl with long, dark hair looked away silently, and behind her the sound of approaching footsteps could be heard. He held his head and gun, quietly groaning in pain as she walked around with the whip, commenting on how hard it was, accompanied by a sharp beep. The girl with a serious and slightly bruised face was thinking about the overall result of the 5 teams, which was 58 minutes and 58 seconds. The screen showed the 5th team's data. Time 58 minutes, 58 seconds, and a final score of 16 out of 100. She stood there, battered and shocked, as an explosion thundered behind her, and a message explained that footage of the battle, captured by a drone, had been sent to a smartwatch for individual analysis. Hajin sat tensely, realizing that there were only 16 seats, and Nayun looked upset, wondering why Chai Nayun had beaten her despite the split scores. She silently thought about how she was trying to close the gap between the teams, but wondered if that was the limit of her abilities, while the confident man stood next to her with his arms crossed. A confident young man with white hair and golden eyes stood with his arms crossed, wearing a dark sleeveless jacket and gloves against a soft pink glow. Suho smiled confidently with his arms crossed while Hajin and Nayun watched him, a glowing arrow pointing from Suho to the lonely girl with an indifferent expression. He clenched his teeth so hard his jaw ached, overcome by a sudden, inescapable feeling. The hand fell to the surface with a dull thud, emphasizing the abruptness and decisiveness of the moment. Nayun walked confidently past the seated students. One of the girls covered her face with her hand in confusion, and the guy leaned back, maintaining an indifferent look. Say's dark figure appeared behind Nayun, who looked up in surprise from her chair. The girl called out to Nayun with genuine excitement, causing her to turn around and calmly respond, recognizing her as Yeon Ha. One girl asked another about the results of her practical training. She replied that she had taken 4th place, mentioning 2 who were desperately striving for victory, and asked about her success. She quietly admitted her 16th place, and he, unable to contain his emotions, exclaimed that it was terribly upsetting. She pointed at him excitedly, saying that 16th place with that arrow was respectable, adding that it was good that he didn't drag everyone down. He was drawn to a strong feeling when he saw Nayun standing confidently in the center of the class, while the others silently watched him from their seats. He was sure that because of him, the journey took 50 minutes instead of 10, convinced of his involvement in the delay. Despite his significant contribution to the battle against monsters, he felt uneasy, fearing that someone was talking about him behind his back. Dozens of babies released by an octopus were destroyed before they could reach shore. He wondered if these were normal magic bullets used, while the other 2 praised the shooter, saying that the success was achieved easily and impressively thanks to him. The girl with long, dark hair and violet eyes looked forward seriously. Light scratches marked her face, and a hooded sweatshirt was pulled over a black turtleneck. He scratched the back of his head in embarrassment, admitting that he had missed the notification due to training, and wondered how much his level had increased. At the next training session, as expected, he relied on luck, and even surpassed his previous results, deciding that it was worth interfering with Yeo Yunha's plans. Sports activities have also noticeably improved his other indicators. Messages appeared on the laptop screen, explaining that his strength, stamina, and health had increased slightly due to training and mana absorption, which he owed to insight and luck. It was decided that since grades had improved so much, that was enough studying for today. He sat on the floor with a bottle of water in one hand and a laptop on his lap, looking slightly tired but focused. The empty exercise machine stood motionless, and the thought flashed through my head that perhaps it was worth going back. Under the starry sky stood a traditional building, its windows and nearby bushes softly glowing in the night. The camera moved closer to a sign on the door with the words, Yu Yeon Ha, engraved on it. She sat at the table, arms crossed over her chest, a serious expression on her face, surrounded by a laptop, notepad, pens, a drink, and a burger in the dimly lit room. A powerful energy blast struck the target with force the moment her hand pressed a key on the laptop, activating the action. She recalled that he fired 60 shots from the pistol in 2.78 seconds. She wondered if it was possible to pull the trigger 20 times a second, or if there was an automatic fire mode. He noted that his reactions were noticeably different from the others, that his health indicators were lower than most of the cadets, and that he suddenly changed weapons, which seemed strange. She wondered why she had never seen him at Yvonne's school, and couldn't help but glance at the glowing device on her wrist. A message from the player, Shin Jun Heki, appeared on the wrist display, to which the owner of the device quietly uttered only a short, "Ah." The woman with long dark hair pulled back into a ponytail, smiled softly as she looked at the holographic message coming from her wrist device. He analyzed the video and noted with annoyance that someone was wasting time on trifles again. The man stood confidently, resting his foot on a rock among the rubble, contemplating the importance of recognizing strong members who could lead the guild, while another criticized his team, calling them useless. Shin Jong-hak considered the figure with the gun, and a close-up showed him grinning faintly. She laughed carefreely, sitting barefoot on a chair, remembering how he pretended not to be interested, but was the one who asked about it first. They noted that the ability level corresponding to 934th place was sufficient to complete the task, which caused a silent reaction. A message appeared from Shin Jong-hyuk, asking if she would be lucky with him. She remained silent, looking ahead with a calm but serious gaze, not showing any emotion. Against the backdrop of a modern city with flickering holograms, the futuristic building of the Office of the Creators Grace Guild towered. There was a sign on the table indicating the position of Deputy Guild Leader, and a voiceover announced that a visit to the guild was scheduled for Friday in 2 weeks. She agrees, and suggests they switch to something more interesting while he stands in the background, holding a book. A smiling young man appears on the screen, and the woman in the chair notices that there is something special about Kim Soo-ho. In the credits, Yoon Seung-ah is introduced as the deputy head of the guild, Creator's Mercy, ranked 307th. He moves through the air smoothly and precisely, as if following the flow of water, demonstrating exceptional swordsmanship that has no equal in modern schools of combat. He watches silently, noting that his movements resemble a graceful sword dance. She reflects that his amazing power cuts through not only the monster, but space itself, while he quietly approaches, holding a stack of books in his hands. He recalls the names Essence Straight, Red Moon, and Cold Confession, understanding why the largest guilds in Seoul were eager to acquire them. She enthusiastically declares her desire to take him in, while the man next to her expresses doubt as to whether he is even a member of any guild. They watch footage of Kim Soo-ho's fighting skills, ignoring the hero himself, while footage of other cadets flashes on the screen. She suddenly reacts with surprise and says, "What? Wait!" Their attention turns to a hologram of a boy with a gun, and one of them asks if he really uses that kind of weapon. The woman listens as the man explains that there is already talk about him in the guild community, and thanks to his work with Yun-ha, many have seen the footage of the fight. He clarifies that it is not even an automatic rifle, but he managed to fire 60 shots in 3 seconds, of which 59 hit the target. He adds that even with outstanding reaction and shooting skills, an ordinary pistol cannot withstand such a load. Says Ha-jin Kim is acting eccentrically and has already been nicknamed Heretic in the academy. She calmly explains that immediately after joining KUB, he changed his primary weapon from a sword to a pistol, calling this act an epiphany. The frame shows various weapons floating in a dark space, illuminated by soft light, and the accompanying text explains that it is impossible to reveal one's own special abilities until enlightenment is achieved. It is further explained that sometimes fighters change their main weapon if it does not suit their skills. Says. At the training ground, one of the cadets advises trying out different types of weapons, while another listens attentively, holding a spear in his hands. The woman in the chair comments that enlightenment at 17 is the result of rapid development, but if it is limited to a gun, there is nothing unusual in it. The man next to him continues to listen silently. They discuss the need to establish surveillance, and one asks if there are any free scouts left, but is told that they are all already taken by other extraordinary figures. She decides to put the matter aside, explaining that if they have a diamond in the dirt, it will shine on its own, without any outside help. She watches what is happening closely, mentally noting that everything will become clear soon. He lies in bed, hugging his pillow and snoring, wondering in his sleep whether anyone can be considered a heretic. Ses Ha-jin Kim charges forward with fury, his sword blazing with energy and his gaze filled with focused determination before striking. A confident young man in gloves delivers a swift and powerful blow, grinning savagely as the lines of movement emphasize the speed of the attack. Ses two fighters clash in a fierce one-on-one training bout, shocking the arena crowd on the first day of individual combat training. Ses one-on-one fights took place between teams of 2 cadets each, with an instructor watching the fights closely on the training ground. The blonde confidently points her sword at her confused opponent, while Rachel's scoreboard shows the score as 16-2 in Lucian's favor. She believes that such a fight is easier to evaluate and less traumatic. He shouts out in anger that Kim Ha-jin is ranked 934th, adding to the tense atmosphere. The instructor abruptly orders Ha-jin to get up immediately because the scoreboard already shows the score 18-0. He wonders why he has to fight the instructor and is told that the training pistol is not ready yet and training with a real weapon is too dangerous. Approaching his defeated opponent, he informs him that he will now be his instructor. He offers to surrender, but hears a firm answer that this is unacceptable in a real fight. The command to strengthen the defense is given, after which the enemy is hit and his eye flashes with a blue digital pattern. In the midst of a furious fight, one fighter kicks the other with force, sending him flying backwards in a whirlwind of energy and flying debris. He watches with alarm as debris begins to fall around him, while the other looks up in shock, feeling sweat running down his face. Says a determined girl with orange hair delivers a powerful punch to a surprised guy in a blue hoodie, the force of the blow emphasized by the motion lines and a bright pink effect. Say dark shadow suddenly attacks Ha-jin, causing him to become confused, while Suho watches the awkward situation from the side. He realizes with amazement that his opponent is closely monitoring his every move. The term foresight is introduced, the ability to see at a distance and roughly predict the trajectory of an enemy's attacks. This is accompanied by the image of a glowing figure in a fighting stance. He admits that the technique helps, but is still forced to dodge, barely avoiding a blow, while someone insistently shouts his name. Ses. One guy tells another to just watch him, to which he laughs and replies that he's just jumping. He grabs his shoulder in shock as 2 people laugh in the background, and a notification states that he has gained 40 SP. He concludes that the ability to attract attention does indeed bring tangible benefits. Exhausted, he kneels down at the vending machine, finally pulling out a can of soda and looking at it with a tired, wary look. A girl enters the room with a bag in her hands, and a dark-haired guy slightly bows his head in front of her. He looks at her hesitantly, and she responds with silence, looking sharp and impenetrable. As he watches her go, he thinks that, despite the fact that he painted this image himself, her character turned out to be completely different. He suggests conducting a small experiment by pressing a button on the machine. The girl with long dark hair turns around sharply at the screen behind her, in which her name is heard. Yoon-ha. A falling soda can slowly spins in the air, with drops flying around it. She lifts the can with a determined look, her long hair flying as she prepares for action. At the machines, she asks if he is making fun of her, to which he responds by asking her what she means. She thanks him for helping her during her last training session and adds that he wanted to be friends with her. He continues the thought experiment by wondering how many points he would get for talking to the main character if the attention of secondary characters is worth 40. She calmly tells him not to drink, after which she starts saying something else. He catches a can of soda falling in the hallway, looking surprised but focused. The girl with long dark hair sternly warns not to address her informally without permission, giving the first warning and pointing her finger. He holds the jar with a slight smile as her long hair sways nearby. The girl confidently walks across the yard with a large bag in her hands, and behind her, buildings and trees stand motionless. He looks down, maintaining a focused and slightly puzzled expression. He notices the change in weight of the bag as he grips its handle tightly. She opens a large bag, standing alone on the tiled floor, her long hair flowing down her back. He holds up a can of Coca-Cola with a satisfied smile, admitting that he secretly planted it. While off-camera, we hear the exclamation, "Ah, there he is, the psycho!" She angrily shakes the can over her head, shouting words of irritation at the vending machine. Sassy girl stands next to a machine, holding a drink and a bag, looking surprised or taken aback. She stands alone on the sidewalk, clutching her bag tightly to herself, and someone watches her from behind the railing, thinking that cola is innocent. She enjoys simple treats, cola, ramen, hamburgers, but because of her reputation, he can't afford to buy them for her. He muses that if he starts changing unknown settings without warning, he will hardly earn any points even with short dialogues, so he will have to interfere with the main plot. The narrative reveals that, in exchange for their souls, they gained enormous power, became servants of the devil, and spread throughout the world, hiding in a museum to eliminate a certain person. The heroes arrived during the excursion and destroyed the enemies, which allowed Kim Soo-ho to attract the attention of the other participants in the story. The story specifies that Kim Soo-ho and Chai Na-yoon will appear, and that the human monsters do not pose a serious threat yet, as this is just the beginning of the story, as he thinks that everything is working out perfectly and that he will be able to fit into this episode. He is considering joining a museum tour when a man calls out to him and asks why he is standing there instead of heading to his dorm after class. Someone demands that the cadet give his number, but he apologizes, saying that he is already leaving, and slams the lid of his laptop. Sass. Distorted lines and numbers appear on the laptop screen, giving the calm scene an unsettling digital edge. He explains that in Cuba there are associations called clubs, small groups of cadets with common interests and activities. The illustration shows people practicing martial arts, gardening, playing the piano, and painting, demonstrating the diversity of clubs within the Cuba. The clubs serve not only for personal development, but also to strengthen the bonds between cadets, symbolized by the shining handshake. Under a bright sky with radiant columns and flying doves, the narrator decides to visit a club called the Cubic Gate. Say so. Han Hyun, chairman of the Healing Rain Travel Club, thanks everyone for participating in their unification. Among this year's newcomers, they note many impressive personalities, while the girl silently watches the proceedings. She yawns widely, and he remembers that he was unsure of the authenticity of the applications for admission, while those around him nervously advise him to breathe deeply. He hesitantly begins to talk about the essence of the Healing Rain Club, describing it as a place for relaxation and mentioning monthly trips outside the club through the portal. He explains that today, they will get acquainted with the activities of the club and take a short tour of the surrounding area. With a determined expression on his face, he says, "To Seoul," while the person standing next to him maintains a serious and focused look. He thinks about breaking up into pairs for a free trip, notices two people talking, and thinks that this completely coincides with the content of his book. The narrator explains that their goal is to visit the Seoul National Arms Museum, where the first major story arc will begin, and they intend to go there with the main characters to then become immersed in their story. There is a proposal to draw lots, to distribute the participants into teams. He watches as someone's hand reaches for the box and wonders to himself if the teams are really randomly formed. He decides that it doesn't matter who he comes across, because everyone will act independently. The girl, with a serious expression, suggests that they go one by one, emphasizing the tension of her words. He agrees slightly nervously, saying, "Yeah, let's do that," as she turns away, her long hair swaying behind her. He watches her go and adds, "Oh, and one more thing." She sharply reminds that she forbade addressing her as you. He receives a second warning and accepts it with visible awkwardness, realizing that there will be no third chance. Cess. The camera pans across a spacious, light-filled schoolyard as students walk past a large, modern building under a clear sky. It then shows a vast exhibition hall filled with people, which is said to be the largest display of model guns in Korea. He walks alone along a brightly lit corridor where among the dark silhouettes someone is talking to a child, and in the depths of the hall other visitors are moving. The girl touches the glowing exhibit with a concentrated look while he watches from the side, thinking that this place is not at all like her usual surroundings. He notices something and comes to the conclusion that the target must be nearby. His gaze falls on a boy in a blue jacket looking at a display case in a spacious, bright room, while another man approaches him in the background. He stands in profile, motionless and calm, looking thoughtfully into the distance, with a serious expression on his face. Say boy with blue hair notices someone approaching from behind, turning slightly in surprise under the clear sky near the buildings. One of them asks if the other has looked at the 7 knives on display, before introducing himself as Kim Ha-jin, standing next to the display case. He admits, with a slight smile and an apologetic look, that he was distracted for a second and asks for forgiveness. The question then arises as to whether he is the shooter who took the gun and whether he also joined the travel club. He is described as strong, kind, and fair, although there were so many complaints about him among readers that he seemed more of an exception than an ordinary person. He mentions the armory, and even claims that Napoleon's rifle is kept there. But his interlocutor rejects this proposal. He comes to the conclusion that they don't have enough time, and at that moment, debris begins to fall from the ceiling inside the building. The young man looks up in surprise as he stands in a spacious, glass-ceilinged hallway, surrounded by people walking past, and quietly says, "What?" There is a dull crash of falling debris, followed by a warning cry of, "Watch out!" As the people below look up in shock. 6 monsters suddenly appear outside the museum, causing shock and panic among the crowd as the alarm sounds again. In front of the building, in the rain, 2 figures stand motionless, and one of them, frowning, mutters in annoyance, "Damn." Noticing something dangerous, Shace Hajin shouts out an angry "okay," while Suho and Nayun react violently, and the atmosphere becomes tense. Everyone rushes towards the exit, shouting that they need to run and asking where he is. In the crowded crowd, someone loudly orders people not to push, and a girl with pigtails sternly commands, "Back, I said!" There is a scream, and a crushing blow comes down from above, with a powerful explosion of energy and debris. Suho punches the wall, leaving a deep crack, while Hajin watches in amazement from the foreground. Amid the dim light and tense bustle, people, including the man and woman in the foreground, look shocked as they encounter the crowd. He is kneeling, holding a small child tightly in his arms, and a figure approaches them from the left, casting a shadow. The woman urges everyone to remain calm and assures that the hero will arrive soon. She warns that if they try to run outside, they will be instantly torn apart by monsters. After which the sound of broken glass is heard, the theft is discovered, and the protective barrier is activated. People rush in panic towards the massive gates, ominously glowing red and accompanied by alarms, while a few stragglers add to the atmosphere of urgency and danger. She orders him to take the weapon immediately, claiming that it should hold off the threat until the hero arrives, and he reluctantly agrees. Suddenly, her gaze goes up, and her eyes widen in shock at the sight of a powerful blow from above. In tense silence, the crowd watches as a figure with a quiver steps forward, followed by a man in formal shoes, surrounded by an ominous darkness. The red-haired figure moves with a confident gait, a dark shadow looming over it, and a voice announces that one of the agents has already penetrated inside. She is called the humanoid monster Lucius Dog, a villain whose appearance will serve as the development of the main character. A clawed hand, engulfed in crimson energy, shoots forward as the figure furiously lunges at a distant enemy standing in a defensive stance. With fierce determination, he swings the glowing weapon, shattering glass and showering the space with shards, while the grinning observer below shows no sign of alarm. Cess. According to the book's canon, Kim Soo-ho calmly finds himself between 2 attackers, confident that he can easily deal with them. An explosion thunders as one character delivers a devastating blow, while another stands at a distance, watching its power intently. The figure in the dark coat remains unperturbed as someone breaks through the upper wall, emerging in a cloud of debris and dark energy. Covered in sweat and shock, he realizes that in his version of events, everything should have turned out differently. Kim Soo-ho initially retreats, but then, gathering all his strength, he overcomes his opponent. At this time, Nayun quietly calls out to him in the semi-dark room. Someone's cry of "Kim Soo-ho" is followed by the boy falling down, choking and coughing up blood, clearly in pain. One man persistently inquires about his condition, and, lying on the floor, he weakly replies that he is fine. He understands that he is not in the best shape, and there is almost no time left. But suddenly, a man's leg steps forward, and dark energy begins to swirl around the owner, causing surprise to the woman next to him. She fires arrows with fury, shouting words, and a deadly hail rushes towards a distant figure standing in a deserted space. The confidently smiling figure is pierced by multiple arrows, the dark splashes and sharp lines highlighting the ferocity of the attack. Nayun parries several arrows flying at her in amazement, while Suho calmly takes the blow, allowing the arrows to hit without flinching. The arrows hit the target, after which she, surrounded by scarlet laser beams, freezes in amazement, tightly clutching the bow in her hands and demonstrating firm determination. Instantly realizing that it wasn't a special ability or regeneration that she was facing, she managed to dodge the swift attack aimed straight at her at the last moment. Flying arrows scatter in the air, and he, shrouded in a swirling dark aura, silently endures the onslaught, relying only on his agility to dodge the blows. The sinister enemy smirks, while Hajin, overcome with fear, quietly mutters to himself, and Nayun shouts with urgent anxiety at Chai Nayun, demanding that he retreat before the impending dark attack. She intercepts the blow with fury, her eyes wide with inner tension, and he, surrounded by dark energy, rushes forward with a powerful kick, while the observer below watches the events with alarm. The man, clearly concerned, and with beads of sweat on his face, asks Nayun if she is okay. She shouts out an irritated answer, but before she can finish, a scarlet blow quickly cuts through the air, throwing the figure back. He coughs violently as thick shadow energy engulfs his arm, trying his best to contain the destructive power pouring inside him. A dark, fiery aura swirls around the sword, and glowing runes flare up on the blade, turning into a terrifying silhouette of a dragon with an oppressive presence. The enemy, distorted in a predatory grin, stands surrounded by the fiery aura of a dragon, exuding primordial power and dark strength. He, overcome with shock, notices that the figure with dark fiery energy has changed its body. Hajin tries to parry a furious blow from a red-hot opponent with flaming eyes, but the latter delivers a crushing blow from above. He coughs spasmodically, fighting off pain and exhaustion as thick scarlet energy compresses the space around him. A red-haired man is pierced by arrows, while a figure with glowing eyes rushes at the enemy, holding a trident-like weapon. A girl with a bow and quiver pulls back the bowstring, her gaze focused and determined before she takes the shot. Standing with arrows stuck in his back, he is enveloped in raging dark red flames, after which he releases a powerful fiery blow, saturating the space with monstrous energy. A sudden sharp attack hits Hajin. He spits out blood with force, and Nayun, holding the bat in his hands, freezes with wide eyes, uttering a frightened "Ah!" A figure in a fluttering black cloak throws an opponent into a wall, with such force that the blow is enveloped in flashes of scarlet energy. He notices a girl pinned to the wall by a crushing dark fiery force, and realizes that the situation is getting out of control. He anxiously calls for everyone to retreat immediately, realizing that, at this rate, someone could die. He tries to cope with the shock, wondering why the plot suddenly changed, since he was the author of this story. With an effort to calm his breathing, he concentrates on what he can do right now, closes the laptop, and clutches the small card tightly in his hand. A sudden shock interrupts his thoughts as bullets begin to slip out of the palm of his hand holding the gun. Cursing under his breath, he realized that this ammunition wouldn't be able to even scratch the humanoid monster. The system description of the magic bullet confirmed its low destructive power and lack of special properties. He reflects that even with increased power, he still won't be able to deliver a fatal blow. But since this world is his own creation, the key parameters are unchanged. His fingers race across the glowing virtual keyboard, and beads of sweat form on his forehead from intense concentration. A glowing magic bullet hovers above an outstretched palm, and a system notification offers to change its characteristics. The interface displays updated properties. The killing power has been increased to 6 units. 104 SP is required for confirmation, after which the changes are successfully saved. The hand inserts the magazine into the pistol with practiced speed, and the question flashes through the mind as to why there are so many different heroes in this world. He points the weapon forward, believing that the combination of properties and compatibility will allow him to overcome the difference in levels and unleash even greater power. The sight is trained on 2 opponents who are clashing furiously, one radiating dark energy, the other countering it with the power of light. Their fight is full of tension and fury. There is a confirmation in my thoughts that this enemy really does have demonic traits. The finger confidently presses the trigger, and the shot is accompanied by a blinding flash. The battle heats up again when one of the fighters shouts out Kim Soo-ho's name, and both opponents, surrounded by waves of destructive energy, continue to exchange furious blows. The gun releases a powerful blue energy bolt that slams into the red-haired opponent's chest with force, exploding in a bright flash.